arrival of the Honorable Senate President and the Senators of the Republic.
Video ko. Video. Video.
The 57th session of the Senate of the second regular session of the 19th Congress is hereby called to order. The chamber will be led in prayer by distinguished Majority Floor Leader, Senator Joel Villanueva.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let us bow our heads and close our eyes and be in the presence of the Lord. Heavenly Father, we come before you, humbling ourselves, knowing that apart from you, we can do nothing. But if you are with us, no one and nothing, no circumstances here on earth can be against us. Today, we come into your throne and asking for the forgiveness of our sins in words, in thoughts, and in deeds. Today, as we open our session, allow us to fulfill your divine calling and purpose in our existence. We also pray for our communities affected by drought caused by the strong El Nino, particularly the 24 provinces in northern and central Luzon. Our kababayans who are also facing hardships, especially those who are victims of fires, floods, and landslides. We claim Psalms chapter 46, verse 1, that says, God is indeed our refuge and strength, an ever-present living help in trouble. We continue to commend into your throne the activities that we're going to do today. Allow us to be a channel of your blessing to millions of our people, not only from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, but also all over the world. Bless this institution led by our Senate President Mig Zubiri. Bless every employee, every senator, every family represented in this august chamber as we continue to carefully give back to you all the glory, all the honor and praise. Everybody agree and say amen and amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Dear colleagues, today we are honored to have with us the former governor of the state of Utah from 1993 to 2003 during the administration of George W. Bush, former Secretary of Health for the United States government, no other than Sir Michael Leavitt, who is the president of the Tabernacle Choir of Temple Square. Together with, and we are deeply honored that the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square graciously accepted our invitation for them to perform in the Senate today. The Tabernacle Choir at the Temple Square was organized in 1847 by the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints in Salt Lake City, Utah, in the United States of America. As part of the choir's world tour, dubbed as Hope, this visit to the Philippines is the first in its 177-year history. This world-renowned choir consists of 360 vocalists and over 70 orchestra members who are all volunteers. The universal language of the music transcends culture and generations to bring peace, healing, and hope to listeners worldwide. The choir concludes their Philippine visit this evening with a second concert at the MOA Arena, which will be streamed to thousands of fans gathering for watch parties across the Philippines. So we'd also like to thank Elder Carlos Revillo from the Philippine Area Presidency of the Church of Latter-day Saints. And today the group will be performing the following songs: Awake and Arise, All Ye Children of Light, Bahay Kubo, and God will be with you till we meet again. So let's lend our ears to this wonderful choir and be inspired by their songs and music.
Shine on with the light that we brought down from heaven, the light that grows bright as we walk in His way, till darkness is banished and earth is resplendent, till ours is the luster of sun at noonday. Then and sing of the way and the truth shining brightly, and ponder the lilies whose life is a call to face each new day unafraid and believing, to give every hour, every moment our all. Bahay kubo kahit munti, ang halaman doon ay sari-sari, singkamas at talong, sigarias at mani, sitaw, bataw, patani, kundo, patola, upod, kalabasa, at saka meron pa labanos, mustasa, sibuyas, kamatis, bawang at luya, sa paligid-ligid ay puno ng lingap. Bahay kubo kahit munti, ang halaman doon ay sari-sari, singkamas at talong, sigarias at mani, sitaw, bataw, patani, kundong patola, umpog, kalabasa, at saka meron pa labanos, mustasa, sibuyas, kamatis, bawang at luya, sa paligid-ligid ay puno ng lingap. Sa paligid-ligid ay puno ng lingap. God be with you till we meet again. By His counsels guide, uphold you. With His sheep securely fold you. God be with you till we meet again. Till we meet, till we meet, till we meet at Jesus' feet. Till we meet, till we meet, till we meet. God be with you till we meet again.
Thank you very much to our Tabernacle Choir. Thank you so much. And good luck to your concert tonight. Good luck. Good luck. Good luck. We have, by the way, with the choir today, 3 Filipino members out of the 420 ensemble. 1 full-time participant, Leo Marcelo, who was from Quezon City and Pampanga before moving to the U.S., and 2 global participants who have been invited to do select performances here in the Philippines, Sunday Indino and Ronald Ba, both from Cagayan de Oro City. Senator Coco Pimentel, our neighbors in Cagayan de Oro. Once again, thank you very much. To our dear friend Michael Leaveth, thank you so much for joining us. Again, please give him a round of applause for visiting us here in the Philippines. Thank you. Thank you. Secretary, please call the roll of members.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senator Angara, Senator Binay, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Escudero, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Ontiveros, Senator Lapid, Senator Legarda,
Present online.
Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pimentel, Senator Poe, Senator Revilla, Senator Tolentino, Senator Tulfo, Senator Villanueva, Senator Villar Cynthia, Senator Villar Mark, the Senate President.
With 22 senators physically present and 1 senator virtually present for a total of 23 senators, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. President, we'd also like to acknowledge Mr. Carlos Revillo Jr. from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who is also with us, part of the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square. Mr. President, also we'd like to acknowledge some guests from the gallery, guests of our Senate President, Mr. Martin Tuazon, Special Envoy of the President to the United States. Also, guests of this representation, BCDA Chairman and former Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana is also with us. Guests of Senators Revilla and Pimentel, Dr. Robert Ross McInally, Rotary International President. From Rotary Clubs in Korea, Mr. Beck Johnson, Mr. Gwang Gui Kim. From Rotary Clubs in the Philippines, Ms. Rodora Gonzalez, Johnny Go Yu, Ms. Maria Gina C, Ms. Veronica Yu, Ms. Rosario Gonzalez, Ms. Bing Carion. Also guests of the Senate and this representation, PMMA officials led by its Superintendent, Commodore Tocayo Joel Abutal is also with us. Guests of Senator Lapid and Senator Ejercito, LGU officials of Padre Garcia, Batangas, led by Mayor Celsa Rivera, Mayor Glo Alindogan of Juban, Sorsogon, guests also of Senator Chis Escudero. Guests of our Senate President and the Senate, Misamis Oriental Mayors, Mayor Mondigo of Sugbong Cogon, Mayor Lagbas of Kinogitan, Mayor Mugot of Gitagum, Mayor Akain of Initaw, Mayor Abrogar of Claveria, Mayor Emano of Tagoloan, Mayor Roa of Naawan. From Cebu, Mayor Joven Mondigo of Medellin, and from Bukidnon, Mayor Pablo Lorenzo of the municipality of Quezon. We welcome all of them in this August chamber, Mr.
May I
President.
just ask for a minute suspension so we can approach also our guests? and
Yes,
say
Mr.
hello?
President.
Session
Thank
suspended
you.
for a minute.
Mr. President, Mr. President, I move that we defer the approval of the journal of the 56th session Tuesday, February 27, 2024 at a later hour. So move, Mr.
There
President.
be no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, the gentleman from Sorsogon, Senator Chis Escudero, is seeking the floor. I move that he be recognized, Mr. President.
I just want to, before I recognize the gentleman for Sorsogon, my mayor from the town of Quezon, Bukidnon is here, Mayor Uling Lorenzo. Happens to be here as well. Mayor, yes, our distinguished colleague from Sorsogon, Senator Chis Escudero is recognized.
Thank you, distinguished Majority Floor Leader. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, today we received a notice coming from the Subcommittee on Constitutional Amendments and Revisions of Law scheduling a hearing on RBH number 6, supposedly on March 5, 2024 at 10 a.m. Mr. President, I bring this up because I remember during our first hearing, Senator Risa brought up what she called was a prejudicial question pertaining to either doing constituent assembly by separate sessions of the House and the Senate or through a joint session by both the House and the Senate. If I remember correctly, Justice Vivi Mendoza took the position that it has to be done via a joint session, while former Chief Justice Davidic took the position that it can be done either through a joint or separate session for as long as both houses voted separately in both instances. Yesterday, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, this issue was also raised in the House of Representatives when they were discussing RBH number 7, which is an exact mirror image of RBH 6, except for the provision on voting. Now, Mr. President, Your Honor, in reply to an inquiry made by Representative Castro, acting Deputy Majority Floor Leader Boyet Gonzales responded that they would be taking up RBH number 7 as if it were an ordinary law, meaning it has to go through 3 separate readings, according to him, and I'm paraphrasing. And after it is voted upon, unlike an ordinary bill, it has to get 3/4 of the vote of all the members of the House, and that thereafter it will be sent to the Senate for our action. If it gets 3/4 of the vote, then it is deemed approved. If it does not get 3/4 of the vote, then it is deemed disapproved or dead, according to him. Now, Mr. Speaker, Majority Leader Gonzales was not actually making it up. He cited a specific rule in the House, and I refer to Rule 21, Section 144. I had the privilege, Mr. President, in 1998 of writing these rules, actually. And defending it on the floor, if you remember, during
Yes.
our first term.
I do.
This Section 144, Mr. President, in Rule 21 is not found in the Senate rules. And if I may read it for the record. Proposals to amend the Constitution. The previous section states, Section 143, proposals. The Congress, upon a vote of 3/4 of all its members, may propose amendments to or revisions of the Constitution. Section 144, form of proposals and procedure for adoption. Proposals to amend or revise the Constitution shall be by resolution, which may be filed at any time by any member. The adoption of resolutions proposing amendments to or revisions of the Constitution shall follow the procedure for the enactment of bills. Therefore, following this provision, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, Majority Leader Gonzales said that the Committee of the Whole will report back to the committee their report, after which the committee will report it out to plenary, after which they will put it to a vote. If it garners 3/4 vote, then it is deemed approved. Mr. President, I raise this because we do not have a counterpart or similar rule. And right now, as things stand, the House, it seems, has a rule on how to adopt proposals or reject proposals to amend the Constitution, while the Senate does not. If, for example, we follow or take the position that if there has to be a joint session and that separate sessions are not allowed, then clearly we are wasting our time. I bring this up, Mr. President, again, to reiterate the prejudicial question raised by Senator Ontiveros, because for me, this matter has to be settled before we proceed with further hearings, especially the hearing on March 5. For example, Mr. President, right now, we have on file RBH 1 to RBH 5. RBH 1, I understand, already has a committee report and is being routed. Now, committee reports, Mr. President, are sequential in numbering. Ang mangyayari sa atin dito, dahil unique nga ito at wala naman tayong rule para dito, if we vote upon it and successfully get 3/4, do we approve and ratify RBH 6? Hindi ba pag nagpapasa tayo ng joint resolution with the House, iisa lamang yung number nila at yung number natin? Bakit magiging RBH 6 ay may 1 to 5 pang pending? Ibig sabihin ba nun, tulad ng sinabi ni Justice Azcuna, kung naalala ko, kakalimutan na natin yung 1 to 5 dahil nasa 6 na tayo? Ilang mga bagay na madaling mareresolbahan basta magpasya tayo na ang pagpasa ng anumang panukala para baguhin ang saligang batas ay susundan ng pagpasa ng ordinaryong panukalang batas o resolusyon na hindi natatagpuan sa kasalukuyang rules natin. That is the reason, Mr. President, why I urge caution and prudence over a hasty action on this matter and appeal to the Committee on Rules to study this matter and decide on it with dispatch as well, so that we would be proceeding in accordance with the rules that are similar, if at all, with that of the House. Hindi yung magkaiba tayo ng rules na sinusundan, tapos pagdating sa dulo, doon palang magtatalo, magdedebate at mag-aaway-away. I think prudence will take the better part, would serve us well at this juncture, Mr. President. As suggested by the Minority Leader, it has to be a real, not virtual meeting of the Committee on Rules.
Yes, Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. President, at first I was wanting to consult with the subcommittee chairperson calling for this hearing, but let me also put and state into the records of this August chamber my concurrence with the statements made by the gentleman from Sorsogon that this is indeed unique and something new for this institution to look into, because our rules doesn't carry, Mr. President, this part of
The House rules.
the House rules, Mr. President, and if I may quote Rule 21, proposals to amend the Constitution, particularly Section 144. And as quoted a while ago by the gentleman from Sorsogon, in principle, and this is my personal point of view, Mr. President, I agree and concur with the section provided in the House Rules, Section 144, that in the adoption of resolutions proposing amendments to or revision of the Constitution shall follow the procedure for the enactment of bills. And so, Mr. President, my own personal opinion as the Majority Leader of the Senate is that after the hearings of the subcommittee will, of course, with the agreement and the concurrence of the mother committee, and if we get enough votes, Mr. President, to bring it to the plenary, then we need 3/4, Mr. President, to approve the said committee report. However, Mr. President, during the hearing as well, it was mentioned that it was noted that once we have the committee report, then we can also constitute ourselves as a constituent assembly. The Committee on Rules, as mandated by our colleagues during that hearing, I remember, was asked to prepare a new set of rules to govern the proceedings of the Constituent Assembly. And so with that, Mr. President, let me put into the records that the Committee on Rules will be studying this particular provision, and with the concurrence of our members, we will report it out at the proper time. as again already mentioned by the gentleman from Sorsogon, Justice Mendoza had this position that Congress must meet jointly but voting separately. But Justice Ascuna made mention that there is no need for a joint meeting or joint hearing because the Constitution does not require it. So it's something that we need to talk about and study further, Mr. President, and with the help of our colleagues and especially our legal luminaries here in the Senate, I hope that we'll be able to come up with a concrete solution and provision for our Senate rules in this particular provision, Mr. President.
If I may, with the permission of the Senator Chis Escudero and the Majority Leader, watching the news last night, as I review the news every night, I saw their Deputy Majority Leader, Congressman Boyd Gonzales, who's one of the best, I think, Majority Leaders that we've experienced in the House of Representatives.
If not the best, actually.
If not the best, and he knows his rules.
Most of us, Mr. President, actually
Yes, in one way or another, served under him.
under his wings, Mr.
Under his
President.
wings. He's mentioned very clear, and I quote, that what he was saying is we take it up like a bill, they pass it after it's done, the committee report is presented to the plenary in the House of Representatives, they vote 3/4 of the measure, and it will be transmitted to the House, and if the Senate rather, if the Senate does not act on it, then nothing happens. He said it very clearly. If the Senate does not act on it and does not get 3/4 vote, then there is no amendment to the Constitution. So it was very clear yesterday. But I agree with the good gentleman from Sorsogon. We should be clear in our rules, particularly when it says Congress, it should be here, the Senate, upon the vote of 3/4. The Senate, we have to make it separate, because when you say the Congress, it could mean
No, we can.
joint. So we have to clarify it in our rules.
I agree, Mr. President, because again, the Constitution provides that each chamber is solely has the sole power of crafting its own rules of procedure. Only that it has to be aligned, as I said. Otherwise, both houses may be leading in the separate direction, discussing the very same matter of amending certain provisions of the Constitution. I'd like to make it of record also, Mr. President, that it's been quite some time that the Majority Leader has agreed with something that the House is doing. So let's try to cherish this moment, relish and cherish this moment, because
I hope the video will not be spliced this time, Mr. President, as I have been a victim of splicing of videos, Mr. President.
so may I reiterate, Mr. President, forgive me for the long explanation.
Before
that-
His Honor reiterates, can I make if with the permission of the
Yes,
Senate
absolutely,
President and the
with the
sponsor,
permission of the sponsor.
Majority Floor Leader, I have a question, well, it's a question, Mr. President, because I did not catch that part of the news that our Senate President referred to. Does the statement of Deputy Majority Floor Leader Gonzales stand, is that the official statement of the House? Because it may be one of, if it is, then that's very simple. Is it one of three others, then that's very confusing. Because that is what is mentioned on the floor now. Can we rely on that statement, or is it just his personal opinion? Does anybody?
Mr. President, whenever parliamentary practice and procedure dictate that the statement of the Majority Leader binds the chamber that he represents, as opposed to a statement or position taken by the Minority Leader or anyone from the minority, if there is no objection, then it is considered to be the position of the chair as well. Number two, Mr. President, Deputy Majority Leader Gonzales was not only citing his opinion, he was quoting a provision in their rules. Again, as stated by Majority Leader Joel Villanueva, he was quoting Rule 21, Sections 143 and 144. So he was not actually making it up. Now, Sections 143 and 144, as I stated earlier, are not found in our rules.
Yes, and and just to clarify, Senator Cayetano, he mentioned that in plenary. So it was not an interview, nor was it a side comment. He mentioned it to answer a query of one of their colleagues. It was not objected to. It was not objected by the members.
Mr. President, may I ask for a minute suspension, Mr. President?
Yes.
With the indulgence
Please,
of-
are you ready?
We ask for a minute suspension.
Session suspended.
much, Mr. President. At this juncture, I move that we consider Senate Concurrent Resolution number 10. This is the resolution granting consent to Mr. Delfin N. Lorenzana to receive the U.S. Special Operations Command Medal. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved. Consideration of Senate Concurrent Resolution number 10 is now in order. With the permission of the Secretary, we read only the title of the measure without prejudice to insert in the records the whole text thereof.
Concurrent resolution granting consent to Mr. Delfin N. Lorenzana, Chairman of the Bases Conversion and Development Authority, to receive the United States Special Operations Command Medal from the Government of the United States of America.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I be recognized, Mr. President, to deliver the sponsorship speech?
The Majority Leader is recognized to deliver his sponsorship.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. It is my honor to sponsor Concurrent Resolution number 10 granting consent to Mr. Delfin N. Lorenzana, the Chairman of the Bases Conversion and Development Authority, to receive the United States Special Operations Command Medal from the Government of the United States of America. Mr. President, with 35 years of active military service under his belt, Chairman Lorenzana demonstrated his exemplary service in our military as commander of infantry units from platoon to brigade, armor brigade, and the Army Special Operations Command, as well as serving in staff positions at battalion and brigade headquarters. Throughout his years of service, Mr. President, Chairman Lorenzana, who also served as the Secretary of National Defense from June 30, 2016 to June 30, 2022, demonstrated his expertise in national defense and security, special operations, foreign affairs, public diplomacy, veterans affairs, and strategic leadership. This representation could not think of anyone more deserving to be awarded the USSOCOM or USOCOM Medal, which is given only to select individuals who have made significant contributions to special operations. Congratulations in advance to Chairman Lorenzana, and we urge this august chamber, this body, to wholeheartedly give our consent to Chairman Lorenzana's receipt of the United States Special Operations Command Medal. Thank you very much, and may God bless us all. Mr. President, this juncture, Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa would like to co-sponsor the measure. I move that he be recognized, Mr. President.
Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa is recognized to deliver his co-sponsorship speech.
Thank you, Mr. President, Majority Leader. Mr. President, I rise today with zeal and pride to co-sponsor Senate Concurrent Resolution number 10, granting consent to my fellow alumnus of the Philippine Military Academy, Honorable Delfin N. Lorenzana, Chairman of the Bases Conversion and Development Authority, to receive the United States Special Operations Command Medal from the Government of the United States of America. Selfless service to God and country, honor and excellence. These are the core values inculcated in us by our alma mater. And yes, these are the self-same values embodied by Chairman Lorenzana. Mr. President, Chairman Lorenzana is no stranger to public service, dedicating 35 years in active military service, receiving various awards and commendations for his outstanding contributions to our country, especially in the defense and security sector. After hanging his uniform, Chairman Lorenzana accepted another challenge, this time as the head of the Office of Veterans Affairs of the Philippine Embassy in Washington, D.C., where he greatly contributed in lobbying for the passage of legislative measures for the Filipino World War II veterans. As if the selflessness inherent to heroism was not enough, Chairman Lorenzana became the hero of our heroes. He was thereafter appointed as the 36th Secretary of National Defense, where he wasted no time in pursuing a modernized armed forces amidst the challenges brought about by COVID-19 pandemic, prior to being appointed as the chairman of the BCDA. With his vast years of untarnished public service, it no longer came as a surprise to me that he is being conferred with yet another international recognition, this time by the government of the United States of America. As they say, give credit where credit is due, Mr. President. I join this august chamber in commending our man of the hour, Chairman Lorenzana, for continuously raising our flag of excellence, of excellent public service, high enough to be recognized not only by our neighboring countries, but even those across the globe. May you continue to serve our country beyond the call of duty and be an inspiration to all of us in being of service to our country without reservations. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, no other member wishes
Majority
to...
Leader, Senator Gatchalian seeking the floor.
Senator Gatchalian, yes.
Yes,
Mr.
Yes.
President.
Mr. Chairman, I did not prepare a written speech, but I would like to personally congratulate Secretary Lorenzana for receiving this very important award. And I had the pleasure of working with him. He is the original proponent of the Philippine Defense Ecozone. In fact, his vision was to create our own defense, local defense industry. And I remember when I was the chairman of the Economic Affairs Committee, I personally met with him and he laid down his plans for the country to be self-reliant, to be independent, and of course, producing our own armaments and maybe in the future export it to other countries. So again, once again, I would like to personally congratulate Secretary Lorenzana for this award. It is truly befitting for him to receive this award, considering that he has served our country for decades and decades. Congratulations, Secretary.
Senator Pia Cayetano is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I would also like to associate myself with the sponsor. Secretary Lorenzana is truly deserving of this award, and it is not me, but my brother, Senator Alan, who worked extremely closely with Secretary Lorenzana, and he never has anything but good words for the secretary. In fact, during the pandemic, on the rare occasion, I think there were 1 or 2 family events during the pandemic, and there was an opportunity for me to come and greet. He would always, my brother, I'm referring to my brother, would always go out of his way to tell me that all the things that he has done with the secretary, how much respect and admiration he has for the secretary. So I am very happy to be part of this momentous event and be associated with the resolution, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Senator Robin Hood Padilla is also seeking the floor. I move that he be recognized, Mr. President.
Yes, Senator Robin Hood Padilla is recognized.
Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Pangulo, at sa ating pinunong mayorya. Gusto ko lamang pong mapabilang sa mga kasama po natin na nagbibigay ng parangal kay General Secretary Lorenzana, sapagkat ako po mismo ay meron po akong personal na experience kung gaano kasuporta ang binibigay ni General Secretary Lorenzana sa mga katulad ko po na minsan ay nagkaroon ng isang proyekto, kung naaalala niyo po, Secretary, sa West Philippine Sea. Opo, noong ang lahat po ay tahimik, ang lahat po ay hindi nagsasalita. Pero si Secretary Lorenzana po, siya po ay nagbigay sa akin ng pahintulot upang lumayag sa West Philippine Sea at doon po ay magsagawa ng aking pag-aaral kung ano po ang nangyayari talaga doon sa Spratlys at doon po sa ibang lugar pa. At katulad po ng aking sinabi, wala na po akong makikita ganitong klase na pinuno. At buong-buo po ang kanyang katapangan. Talaga pong ang parangal na binigay sa kanya ay bagay na bagay po sa kanya. At bukod po doon, nung panahon po ng pandemic, noong siya po ay nagkaroon ng COVID, naalala ko pa po yun, hindi ko po makakalimutan. Ito pong general na ito, nagpakita pa ng kalakasan, nagpo-push up, lahat na ng klase ng pagbibigay inspirasyon sa taong bayan ay ginawa po niya. Kaya ako po ay isa sa mga senador na sumasaludo sa kanya at gusto ko po talagang mapabilang dito sa parangal na ito dahil tunay po siyang isang leader natin. Bilang isang militar, bilang isang sibilyan, siya po talaga ay sasamahan ko sa anumang lugar na pupuntahan niya. Mahal ko po siya bilang isang leader. Maraming salamat po.
Salamat din at we couldn't agree more.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. President, no other member wishes to interpolate.
Senator Bongo, seeking the floor.
Senator Bongo also would like to co-sponsor the measure, Mr. President.
Senator Bongo is recognized.
Mr. President, I rise today to co-sponsor Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 10, granting consent to former Secretary Delphine Lorenzana, Chairman of the Bases Conversion and Development Authority, to receive the United States Special Operations Command Medal from the government of the United States of America. Kilala ko po si Secretary Lorenzana, noon pa po nakatrabaho ko po siya for almost 3 years. Isang napaka-dedicated, napaka-sipag. Even at his age, after retiring from the military, at nasa abroad, nasa United States na po siya. Pero pinatawag po siya ni dating Pangulong Duterte at hindi po siya nagdalawang isip na magtrabaho muli. At full-time, 6 years po siya nagtrabaho, nakipagpuyatan at hindi po magiging successful na labanan yung terorismo sa Marawi, sa Holo, sa panahon ni Pangulong Duterte, kundi po dahil sa kay Secretary Lorenzana. So ako po'y binabouch ko po ang integridad ni Secretary Lorenzana. Maraming salamat po sa iyong serbisyo sa ating mga kababayan. And I'm so happy until now, dyan ka pa rin po sa gobyerno. Walang kapaguran ng pagsiservisyo ni Secretary Lorenzana. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Likewise, during that time, I can remember that the AFP modernization really leveled up. No? We had gone were the days that the Navy was using World War II era vessels, no? Under the helm, under Secretary Lorenzana. That's when the AFP modernization really took place. That's why we commend Secretary Lorenzana.
Yes, Mr. President. No member wishes to interpolate or propose amendments to the measure. I move that we adopt Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 10, subject to style. So move, Mr. President.
Is there an objection? There being none, Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 10, subject to style, is hereby adopted.
May I also move, Mr. President, that all members of the Senate be made co-sponsor of the measure.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I ask for a minute suspension?
Session suspended.
Speaker, I move, and with the permission of the body, our distinguished colleague from the province of Isabela and Davao, Senator Rafi Tulfo, would like to avail of the privileged hour. I move that he be recognized, Mr. President.
Our distinguished colleague from the province of Isabela and Davao City is recognized, Senator Rafi Tulfo.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. Mr. President, dito po sa Senado, parati tayong nagkakonduct ng mga legislative inquiry in native legislation para malaman sino dapat managot pag may nagagrabyado tayo mga mamamayan. Pero paano po kung ang dapat na managot ay ang gobyerno? Kanino po dapat tumakbo ang taong bayan? What I'm talking about, Mr. President, halos linggo-linggo may lumalapit po sa aking programa na nagreklamo tungkol sa aksidente ng sanhi ay isang government vehicle na nagdulot ng pagkasira ng kanilang sasakyan, pagkasira ng kanilang property, pagka-ospital, dahil sa physical injuries na natamo at pagkamatay ng kanilang mahal sa buhay. Kung mamarapatin po ninyo, ang ating pong papanoorin ang video na ito.
Idol, humihingi po siya ng tulong tungkol sa pagkakabangga sa kanya ng ambulansya ng munisipyo ng Sapian, Capiz noon pong June 19, pasado 2:50 po ng hapon, dyan po sa May Rojas City, Capiz.
Yung pong multicab ay pag-aari po ng barangay. Tama, sir?
Opo, sir.
Nirereklamo po ang ambulansya po ng munisipyo ng Cardona ni Rizal dahil nasagi po nito ang minamaneho niyang tricycle at hanggang ngayon po ay hindi daw po sila binabayaran.
Mr. President, my concern regarding this matter is the frequency of these incidents. And I'm sure I've only hit the tip of the iceberg. Marami po tayo mga mamamayan na napapanganga na lang tuwing naghahabol ng danyos mula sa mga ahensya ng gobyerno na nagmamay-ari ng mga government vehicles na nagdulot ng aksidente. Problem number 1, walang CTPL. Sa aking pagsisiyasat, ang unang problema ay mga government vehicle na wala man lang simpleng CTPL o compulsory third-party liability insurance. Filipino law requires all vehicle owners to purchase a CTPL insurance policy before they register or renew their vehicles with the Land Transportation Office. A CTPL insurance provides compensation to the third party in case of an injury or death caused by an accident. Bakit po nakalusot ang mga government vehicles na walang CTPL? Mr. President, according to LTO Assistant Chief Secretary Vigor Mendoza, may 24.7 million delinquent vehicles na hindi registered or expired ang registration. And he said some of these are vehicles from various government agencies. Kung ganun po, hindi na dapat tayo magtaka na may mga government vehicles na walang CTPL na pwede sanang sumagot sa pagpapagamot ng mga nasaktan sa aksidente. Kawawa po ang mga naagrabyado nila na kadalasan po ay mga mahirap nating kababayan. The LTO should hold the government official liable for not registering a government vehicle, including the head of the department in charge with such registration. Pambihira naman ng gobyerno pa mismo ang pasaway sa mga patakaran na pinatutupad natin. Nakakaya naman po. Tapos, pag may naghahabol ng danyos sa nangyari sa kanila, pahirapan at ang masaklap pa, pinagtataguan o pinaikot-ikot ang mga biktima nila. Problem number 2, CTPL coverage is limited. Ang susunod po na problema ay paano naman ang danyos na hindi na covered ng CTPL. Ang coverage lang po ng CTPL ay bodily injury and or death caused by an accident to a third party. Paano po ang danyos sa property? Yung sasakyan po nung nagrabyado. Malaking pahirapan po sa mga biktima ang pagkasira ng kanilang sasakyan dahil kadalasan ginagamit nila ito sa panghanap buhay para makapasok sa trabaho. Tapos, ang tagal po naka-impound ang sasakyan nila dahil hindi po napapaayos. Mr. President, paano po kung may mga bahay o ibang kagamitan na nadamay sa aksidente? At kung mga pasahero ng government vehicle o yung mga pasahero ng government vehicle, sinong sasagot sa pagpapagamot sa kanila? Hindi po ito covered ng CTPL. Kasi nga po, para lang ito sa third-party liability. At syempre, may limited amount lang ang covered ng standard na CTPL. Ito ay 100,000 pesos. Paano kung lagpas po dito ang danyos? Sa mga ganito pong pagkakataon, nakakatulong lang minsan ang ilang government officials sa pamamagitan ng paglabas ng sarili nilang pera para sagutin ang danyos dahil sa awa o dahil kinalampag na po namin sila. Pero kadalasan, hindi na sasagot ng buong gastusin kasi napipilitang pumasok sa compromise agreement ang biktima kaysa naman wala siyang mapala. Lumalabas ng biktima pa po ang nagkakautang. Utang na loob sa pabayang opisyal ng gobyerno na siyang may kasalanan kung tutuusin. And dito po papasok ang pangatlong problema natin. Saan po ba pwede kumuha ng pambayad ang gobyerno para sa mga danyos na dinudulot ng kanilang mga sasakyan na hindi insured? Mr. President, nakalagay po kasi sa ating saligang batas na the state may not be sued without its consent. Sovereign immunity is based on the judicial and practical notion that the state cannot do wrong. The sovereign is exempt. Again, the sovereign is exempt from suit because there can be no legal right as against the authority that makes the law on which the right depends. Hindi po nadidimanda ang gobyerno para sa mga danyos, maliban na lang kung ito ay papayag na madidimanda. Pero sino ba naman ang gobyerno ang papayag na sila'y madimanda? Kaya kung wala pong CTPL o kahit anong insurance, sino po ang habulin ng biktima? Malimit ang hinahabol ang driver ng government vehicle na nakadisgrasya. Pero kadalasan, minimum lang po ang sweldo ng mga pobreng driver na ito, kaya walang financial capacity na sagutin ang malalaking claims for damages. Gaya ng mga driver ng ambulansya o driver ng mga LGU, minimum wage lang po ang sahod ng mga ito. So, dalawa lang po yan. Mamumulubi ang kawawang government driver o iyak na lang ang biktima. Kung ako po ang iyong tatanungin, talagang hindi po tama ito. Suggested solutions, Mr. President, if the matter is already causing injustice and unfairness in dealing with our people, we have to give some form of consent for certain torts claims against the government. When damage is done, we cannot simply hide behind this veil of sovereign immunity. We have to provide a solution. In the United States, as early as 1946, they enacted a Federal Tort Claims Act that provides legal means for compensating individuals who have suffered personal injury, death, or property loss or damage caused by negligent or wrongful act or omission of an employee of the federal government. While I do not propose that we adopt the same legislation, I would just like to point out that as the government, we have to acknowledge and take responsibility for damages that may be caused by our operations. This will cover the people who have suffered damages, and it will also teach our own people to be responsible in performing the duties. Now, of course, I know the budget for damage claims will be a problem. Magkano bang ilalaan na budget para sa ganito? To remove any unpredictability in the amounts to be claimed and to do away with having to enact a special budget for such damages, my proposal is for all government vehicles to have a comprehensive insurance to cover not only physical injuries or death of third persons, but all damages that may be encountered by a government vehicle, such as damage to other vehicle, damage to property, and physical injury and death of the passenger of the government vehicle. At kailangan linawin sa batas kung sino ang may responsibilidad sa pagkolekta at pag-remit ng insurance premiums na ito. Siya po ay dapat managot pag di po niya na ginawa ang kanyang trabaho. Pwede po nating gawing requirement itong comprehensive insurance sa LTO para sa registration ng lahat ng government vehicles. At dahil ang LTO ay nag-implement ng strict no registration, no travel policy, may extra layer po tayo sa implementation nito. With this, I fully support the modernization of LTO's operations when it comes to vehicle registration. In fact, given that everything is online, baka naman pwede po mamonitor na ng LTO ang mga nag-expire na vehicle registration. There could be an automatic system that notifies via email or text message vehicle owners, government man o private, that the registration will expire para wala nang palusot yung mga red plate na sasakyan. At kung ang sasakyan ay di na ginagamit, dapat po ito ay nireport sa LTO. At nang hindi na ito nagagamit ng iba, kahit wala na sa kondisyon at walang insurance. Lastly, Mr. President, we have a law enacted as early as 1951 entitled Property Insurance Fund, which requires insurance coverage by the GSIS for properties owned by the government for any damage or loss due to fire, earthquake, storm, or other casualty. If we have the diligence and foresight to cover damages caused to our own property, it is unfair that we do not cover damages caused to others, especially the people that we are mandated to serve and protect. Let us take responsibility for our actions, and our people deserve that much. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Maraming salamat, Senator Tulfo. Session suspended for 1 minute.
Mr. President, I move that we refer the privileged speech of Senator Rafi Tulfo and all the interpellations and manifestations thereon to the Committee on Rules. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, this juncture, I move that we resume consideration of House Concurrent Resolution number 21 under Committee Report number 202. This is the resolution granting amnesty to members of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we have sponsored the bill and that I move to open now the period of interpellations and debate and recognize the sponsor, the gentleman from San Juan and Zambales, Senator Jinggoy Ejercito Estrada, and to interpellate our minority floor leader, Senator Coco Pimentel. So move, Mr. President.
Our distinguished minority floor leader to interpolate our distinguished sponsor, Senator Jinggoy Estrada. The two gentlemen are recognized.
Again, Mr. President, if I may, before we resume the period of interpellations, I would like to acknowledge the presence of the commissioners of the National Amnesty Commission, led by Chairperson Attorney Lea Tanodra Armamento, Attorney Jamar Colayan, and Attorney Nasser Moro Salik. We also have from the Commission, Attorney Gwendolyn Pimentel-Gana. They have been here since Wednesday last week during our sponsorship, and they have been with us all this week since Monday. And I would like to place on record and appreciate their dedication, their willingness to answer all queries and concerns about the about the amnesty program, and to personally witness, hopefully, the approval of all our committee reports. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yung MNLF na. Is the granting, if I may commence with the permission of our
Yes, of course.
sponsor. I know he has another commitment before one of the biggest leagues of LGUs, Mr. President. But
Which
we'll
I
make
was the
this,
former president, Mr. President.
we'll make, yes, congratulations, yes, because the San Juan was then a municipality.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Mr. President, is the grant of the amnesty to former rebels or members of the MNLF a part of our government's commitment found in a peace agreement?
Yes, Mr. President. The amnesty program under the MILF peace process is part of the commitment of the government under the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro, with the common desire to end the armed conflict and sustain the peace and stability in Mindanao, Mr. President.
This is the same agreement which has resulted in the BARM law, Mr. President?
No? It is separate, Mr. President.
Separate out. So may we be clarified? How many agreements are we talking about?
Di pwede lakihan.
May comprehensive agreement. Hindi, turo mo. Hindi ko naman mabasa lahat.
Mr. President, the legal basis for the amnesty of the MILF members are found in the annex on normalization of the 2014 comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro, Mr. President. And according to my resource persons, I think the minority leader has also witnessed the signing of this annex, Mr. President.
Was that the one held in Kuala Lumpur, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President.
I was there, Mr. President.
January 2014.
Can I ask for a minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session suspended.
Nasa annex daw sa normalization. May we know for the record, Mr. President, who signed on behalf of the parties to the to that particular agreement which requires or commits the amnesty program, Mr. President?
Well, on the part of the government of the Philippines, it was Professor Miriam Coronel Ferrer, who is the chairman of the panel of the government of the Philippines. And in behalf of the MNLF, it was Mohagher Iqbal, the chairman of the MNLF panel. And it was signed in the presence of Tengku Datu Abgafar Tengku Mohammed. He was the Malaysian facilitator, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President. I've met the Tengku Datu Ghaffar Tengku Mohammed, and a very amiable person, Mr. President. And I think he came here for the signing of the comprehensive agreement. Yes, unfortunately, we miss him, and siguro we have just to express our thanks to the Malaysian facilitator for having been very effective, Mr. President. Was there a previous presidential proclamation on the same subject matter?
Wala.
Dito, MNLF, meron, di ba?
1090, under. There was a similar proclamation, Proclamation 1090, under the administration of President Duterte, Mr. President.
Also,
Proclamation.
Dito.
Pareho? Proclamation 1090 under the administration of President Duterte, and Proclamation number 390 during the presidency of the father of this representation, Mr. President.
So, what does that tell us, Mr. President, when we have multiple amnesty proclamations? Anong ibig sabihin nito na yung past two amnesty programs or proclamations were not successful, Mr. President?
Yeah, as I have mentioned during the last interpellation regarding the RBB, ABB, RBA, ano? Hindi po natuloy yung amnesty proclamation during the time of President Duterte. Also with the same reasons, Mr.
Same reason, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Pero how about the previous one, Mr. President?
During the time of my father,
Yes,
Mr. President.
Mr. President.
How many were? During the proclamation amnesty number 390, during the time of my father, 74 were granted amnesty, Mr. President.
Okay. So sa first presidential proclamation of amnesty covering the MNLF,
Yes.
74 availed.
Yes.
Sa second one, itong proclamation number 1090, wala.
It didn't push through.
Wala.
It was
kasi
not.
nga-
It was never implemented, Mr. President.
Kaya nga, and then these amnesty proclamations have very short lifespan. Ganun po ba yun?
Ilang 2 years. During the administration of President Duterte, it took only 1 year. But this particular amnesty will take 2 years, Mr. President.
So kaya nga, we are learning from past experiences, Bale. We are now finding that the 1-year application period
It's too short.
proved to be too short in the
Yes.
past. Ganun, sa ginawa natin 2 years. Okay.
Correct, Mr. President.
So what is now the rationale? Why did we limit it to 2? Bakit hindi 3 years? Critical ba yun? Is that a critical feature of
I think
an
that is
amnesty
the
program.
most ideal time frame, Mr. President.
So, yes, okay. So, may, ano naman yan? There's nothing we can do about it, no? Kasi that's in the
Yes, that is
presidential
in the
proclamation, no? So,
presidential
either we
proclamation.
concur or not concur. So, how many are we expecting to, who will avail of this latest presidential proclamation or amnesty program, Mr. President?
Mr. President, a number of approximately 1,500 MILF members are projected to apply for amnesty, while an initial of 400 MILF members with pending cases have been submitted by the MILF to the Philippine Government Implementing Panel, which shall be applying for amnesty, Mr. President.
Okay, so concreto.
But however, Mr. President,
yes.
it is noted that in the release statement of the implementing chair of the MILF, Minister Iqbal, on the recently issued proclamation number 405, series of 2023, that thousands of MILF is expected to apply for amnesty, comprised of, how do you pronounce this? Mujahideen?
Mujahideen.
Huh? Mujahideen. And the decommissioned combatants and members and supporters of the MILF, Mr. President.
Okay, so konkretong programa po ito at talagang nakikita na natin even yung bilang ng mga magbe-benepisyo or mag-a-avail ng programa. So, meron po bang, tulad ng tanong ko doon sa unang grupo po na binigyan ng amnesty, meron po ba tayong socio-economic and financial assistance programs for our amnestied or surrendered MILF members, Mr. President?
Meron din po, Mr. President, the availment of amnesty itself is the benefit that will be received by the MILF members. The annex on normalization already provides that a socio-economic program will be undertaken to address the needs of the MILF decommissioned combatants, their families, and communities. And this will be, Mr. President, this will be subject to an in-depth profiling and needs assessment, Mr. President. And the MILF member will have to avail of these socio-economic benefits through the task force for decommissioned combatants and their communities, Mr. President. And the TFDCC, the Task Force for Decommissioned Combatants and their communities, has socio-economic programs enclosed within 4 categories, namely social protection, capacity development, livelihood and employment, and community-based infrastructure, Mr. President. If I can show you this chart, if I can submit it to you, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President, if you have a spare copy, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, thank you for the inputs from our sponsor, and thank you for using the correct term, Mr. President. I think the correct term to use to refer to our MILF brothers and sisters would be decommissioned combatants.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, this is part of the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro. Pagkakaintindi ko mga merong main agreement and then so-called annexes. Then government has to comply with its commitments before an exit agreement is to be executed. So, is this, ito pinag-usapan natin na amnesty program, that critical that without this there will be no, there can be no exit agreement?
Yes, Mr. President, you're totally correct, Mr. President.
Ang commitment po yata natin ay 2022, meron ng amnesty program. So, is the other side not, is the MILF side not complaining that we are already delayed, Mr. President? Or in delay?
The MILF is quite aware that we are delayed, Mr. President.
Sige, but ano naman, basta we have a very understanding partner, Mr. President. So we are thankful for that. So kung ganoon, that means we have established na this is a program which is part of our commitments, government commitments to the MILF. There's a timeline. We're siguro a little bit delayed, so we have to do this with dispatch, Mr. President, as soon as possible. The beneficiaries or the potential applicants are already
In place.
more or less identified and ready to avail of the benefits, Mr. President. There are already socioeconomic programs for them. Anyway, separate, which is
Yes.
separate from this
Yes.
amnesty
Yes,
program,
Mr.
Mr. President. And ongoing na, I'm sure ongoing na. Opo, so, ibang usapan na yung ano doon, yung kung meron mang complaints din doon po. Sige po. So in that case, Mr. President, I think we have already established the need for this program, and
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I see no reason why we should not give our concurrence as required by the Constitution to have a valid amnesty program, Mr. President. So let me again thank our sponsor for his patience and for the time he's given us, and for sponsoring this very critical measure, Mr. President. And I hope, siguro request na lang po tayo ng periodic briefing from the OPAPRU on the
Yes,
status of
the
the different agreements, kasi meron ngang one main agreement pero mga annexes, and the annexes are treated as if they are also main agreements. O, di ba? Separate main agreements din. So maka-monitor po tayo, so we will find out.
The representatives from the OPAPRO are listening, Mr. President.
Kung pwede mag-request, if they can approach the siguro to brief the entire Senate, or kung mas madali, individually.
Yes, if the need arises, Mr. President.
Yes. We shall await a briefing from my office, Mr. President.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Mr. President, no other member wishes to interpolate, and so I move that we close the period of interpolations and debate. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of concurrent resolution number 21. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there objection? There being none, House current resolution number 21 under committee report number 202 is hereby suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I ask for a minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session suspended.
Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we resume consideration of House Concurrent Resolution number 22 under Committee Report number 203. This is the resolution granting amnesty to members of the Moro National Liberation Front. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we have sponsored the resolution, and with that, I move to open the period of interpellations and debate and recognize the distinguished sponsor of the measure, the gentleman from San Juan and Zambales, Senator Jinggoy Ejercito Estrada, and to interpellate our minority leader, Senator Coco Pimentel.
Our distinguished colleague, the sponsor, Senator Jingo Ejercito Estrada, is recognized, and to interpolate the distinguished minority floor leader, Senator Coco Pimentel.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the permission of our sponsor. We'll basically be asking the same questions, this time to apply to the amnesty proclamation covering the MNLF, Mr. President. Is the grant of amnesty to the commissioned combatants of the MNLF also part of a commitment by the government pursuant to a peace agreement?
Yes, Mr. President. The amnesty program under the MNLF peace process is part of the commitment of the government pursuant to the 1996 final peace agreement, Mr. President. This commitment serves as a part of the full implementation of the 1976 Tripoli Agreement between the government of the Philippines and the MNLF, particularly item 12A, third paragraph, which provides for complete amnesty in the areas of autonomy and renunciation of all legal claims resulting from the rebellion that took place in the southern Philippines. Section 153, item 3F of the 1996 final agreement carried over the amnesty provision under the 1976 Tripoli Agreement, Mr. President.
So, in effect, we are implementing the 1996 final peace agreement. Medyo, this is already an old document, Mr. President. Ano ba status nito? How come it's 2024 and we're still implementing this?
Well, again, as I've mentioned earlier, Mr. President, it is a part of the commitment of the government pursuant to that particular agreement in 1996, Mr. President.
Have we tried in the past to comply with the grant of amnesty to MNLF members, Mr. President?
Well, you were asking about the previous proclamation amnesty, Mr. President?
Yes, for
All right.
MNLF, if there are, Mr. President.
Yes, there are three.
Tatlo?
All right. Four, Mr. President. Proclamation 347, done in 1994. There were 136 that were granted amnesty. Proclamation 724, 1996, there were 51 who were granted amnesty. And Proclamation 21, also 1996, 307 were granted amnesty. And Proclamation 1091 during the Duterte administration, but it was never implemented, Mr. President.
So kung nakikita po natin, so we keep on opening the amnesty program, Mr. President. So learning from past practice, ano yung pagkukulang natin? Are we providing too short a period of time for the application, Mr. President? Masama po ba or not advisable na ipahaba yung application period, Mr. President?
No, 1 year. Yes, Mr. President. Under Proclamation 347 and the subsequent Proclamations 724 and Proclamation 19.
Sir, yung 347, 6 months lang.
Under Proclamation number 347, 6 months lang po. And then under Proclamation 724,
90 days lang daw.
90 days. And under Proclamation 1998 ba ito? 1998, ilan? during the time of my father,
Proclamation 21.
Proclamation 21, ilan taon? 6 months. So I think it was
Can
kind
we
of
be,
short,
can we
Mr.
be
President.
educated, Mr. President, by the resource persons? Bakit ba napakaikli ng mga application periods? Tapos napakita naman na nakulang yung time and then another amnesty program, iniiklian nyo pa rin. Why? Can somebody educate us, Mr. President?
Well, according to our resource persons, that is the decision of the President. Hanggat hindi po siguro nakukuha yung mga number of rebels or combatants na nag-avail ng amnesty, ni-extend ng ni-extend.
Okay. So, okay, at least ang new feature nitong ating inaaprubahan na presidential proclamation, 2 years na. Okay,
Yes,
so
2 years na. I think that is the most ideal number of years for them to avail of the amnesty, Mr. President.
Nasabi na po ba natin yung projected number of MNLF
Hindi pa. Not yet, Mr.
members
President.
na ina-anticipate po natin who can possibly or who might avail of this program?
Just like the MNLF, Mr. President, 2,000 MNLF members applying for amnesty is their projection, Mr. President. The final number of applicants shall be submitted by the MNLF groups through the peace mechanisms, Mr. President. So a little bit higher than MILF. Kasi MILF around 1,500 lang, as I mentioned earlier. Ito 2,000. A little bit higher.
May we know, Mr. President, just for the record, who signed on behalf of the parties to the final 1996 final peace agreement, Mr. President?
On the part of the government of the Republic of the Philippines, it was Ambassador Manuel Yan, who was the chairman of the peace panel of our government. And on the part of the MNLF, it was Professor Nur Miswari, who is the head of the MNLF panel. And with the participation of the OIC Ministerial Committee of the Six and the Secretary General of the OIC. It was His Excellency Mr. Ali Alatas, the Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, and the Secretary General of the IOC, His Excellency Dr. Hamid Al-Gabid, Mr. President.
And then are there also socio-economic and financial assistance programs for the members of the MNLF, Mr. President?
Yes,
Pursuant to this peace agreement or any additional agreement, Mr. President?
Definitely, they will also avail of the socio-economic programs for MNLF individuals and communities. These are the initial socio-economic programs for individuals, and additional programs will be implemented based on a needs assessment to ensure long-time sustainability. The following are the socio-economic projects for the community where NMLF are presently located, Mr. President. Pasensya na, medyo maliit kasi, hindi ko na mabasa. Yung salamin ko. Okay, Mr. President, there will be socio-economic programs for MNLF amnesty grantees enrolled under MNLF transformation program. The transformation program is composed of socio-economic, security, confidence building, and community healing and reconciliation components, which altogether aim for the holistic transformation of the MNLF former former combatants in order to facilitate their reintegration into mainstream society. Likewise, the transformation program caters to the families and communities of the MNLF former combatants in order to sustain the holistic and meaningful transition of the beneficiaries from armed combatants to productive civilians. I also am in hold of the chart if
And this is after. Yes, Mr. President, if you can share it. So, Mr. President, ito bang 1996 final peace agreement with the MNLF, just like the 2014 comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro, should also result in an exit agreement?
under the proclamation, no? Under the final peace agreement, there is no provision for any exit agreement, Mr. President.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. President, kasi it got me worried kasi ano na yun, that's already 28 years ago, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, ito na lang po, which is a question applicable to all of the amnesty measures we are tackling. What if there is a person who feels that the person granted an amnesty is not deserving or not qualified to be given the amnesty? What are the remedies available to this individual, Mr. President? Is it possible to, first of all, question the coverage of a person under the amnesty program, the grant of amnesty? Pwede po bang i-question niya ng individuals? Kasi marami pong mga technicalities yung ating amnesty program. May mga crimes covered, crimes not covered, may application period, merong whether you are an active member pa, surrendered member. So, yun lang po yung tanong ko. Let us say someone feels that, someone granted an amnesty,
Mr.
is
President,
not qualified. So, can that be questioned, Mr. President?
there is an opportunity to file an opposition, Mr. President, during the local amnesty board hearing.
Okay. But that's before the grant.
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes. But can the grant itself be questioned, Mr. President? Yeah.
With the grant question. Can it be questioned?
Kasi may technicalities.
Pero draft pa lang to draft pa lang nila. Pwede ma-appeal na. Yan supposed to be yung procedure nila.
Mr. President, the supposed procedure is that the decision of the Office of the President on the grant or denial of amnesty may be appealed to the Court of Appeals within 60 days upon receipt.
It's there. It's in the amnesty proclamation.
Yeah.
Well, where is that remedy found, Mr. President?
The draft. Well, it's found in the draft rules of procedure, Mr. President. The draft rules of procedure.
Draft rules of procedure of what body, Mr. President?
NAC.
Of the National Amnesty Commission, Mr. President.
Oh, so you better act on the rules and issue formally the rules, Mr. President. Kasi I just wanted it spread into the records kasi of course pag may crime, para sa potential aggrieved family. Di ba? Family of the victim. So what if ang feeling niya hindi karapat-dapat? So dapat may mga remedies din po siya.
Yeah. Well, Mr. President, under the rules of court, as I mentioned earlier, the decision of the Office of the President can be appealable to the Court of Appeals, Mr. President, within 60 days.
What rules of court is that, Mr. President? Karangko lang na yung Office of the President ng CA? Mr. President?
Rule 65. Rule 65.
Baka doon yung sa mga disiplina na
Under Rule 65, via certiorari, Mr. President. I am not a lawyer, but
okay, so Rule 65, pwede rin if you can, tapos IRA, maybe you can even go to the Supreme Court kung gano'n. Anyway, so there is no, you're just using Rule 65, grave abuse of discretion, yun lang. Okay, so I think the rules, if the NAC is still drafting the rules, please look at this angle where a concerned individual who believes that the person availing of the amnesty and being granted the amnesty is not deserving for various reasons, maraming possible reasons na hindi ka dapat makakuha ng amnesty, meron po dapat klarong remedy on where that person should go. Baka may factual kasi rito, baka RTC pa nga dapat mag-start yan eh.
hindi siguro.
Kasi may factual eh. May what crime did he commit? Oh. Dito bumagsak dito sa excluded crimes or crimes which cannot be granted amnesty. Just take a look at that angle, Mr. President, and make
Mr.
sure na
President,
may...
we will look into that matter, Mr. President. And I will inform the members of the National Amnesty Commission who are present here today, including your sister, Mr. President.
I think my sister is not a member of the NAC. No? She's just very close to the chairperson, Mr. President. So, here for moral support.
Huh?
But at any rate, para klaruhin po natin, this is like, it's like a treaty, no? We cannot touch the presidential proclamation, Mr. President, no? We cannot amend we cannot amend the wording of the presidential proclamation declaring the amnesty program. What is pending before us is do we concur or not with the... Para klaro po yun, hindi naman
Yes, Mr.
yung mga 2 years, hindi natin magagalaw yun, yung mga crimes covered, hindi natin magagalaw yun. Okay. So the question before us, do we concur or not with the presidential proclamation before us?
You're correct,
Is
Mr.
that correct, Mr. President?
Yes, you're totally correct, Mr.
So with
President.
that clarification, Mr. President, and at any rate, nalagay na rin sa records yun na that need for a clear remedy for people who will claim to be aggrieved persons due to the crime committed by the person applying, Mr. President. Basta ma-address na po yan, I think the system will be more fair for everyone involved. So with that, Mr. President, I thank again our sponsor. Thank you for his insights, for his very clear responses to our questions, Mr. President. And congratulations again for acting expeditiously on this very important and time-bound measures, Mr. President. So thank you once again.
Thank you, Mr. President, especially to the minority leader. Mr. President, I was just wondering if we can approve on second reading these three amnesty proclamation, since there are no amendments, Mr. President.
Pwede, absolutely. And maybe we can just leave behind for next week the one of the CPP-NPA.
Yes.
I
No,
will,
none.
no amendments.
Wala.
How can we amend? Pwede ba amend ako?
So let me close the period of terms muna. Do you have any amendments para before we... Mr. President, at this juncture, no other member wishes to interpret or ask any questions on the measure, and so I move that we close the period of interpellations and debate. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
May I ask for a minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session suspended for a minute.
President, after closing the period of interpellations and debate, I now move that we suspend consideration of concurrent resolution number 22. I so move, Mr. President.
There have been no objection, motion is approved.
Ask for a minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2457 under Committee Report number 160. This is the bill redefining the application of the mother tongue as medium of instruction. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we have sponsored the bill and we are now opening the period of interpellation, and I move that we recognize the distinguished sponsor of the measure, the chairperson of the Senate Committee on Basic Education, Senator Win Gatchalian, and to interpolate our minority leader, Senator Coco Pimentel. So move, Mr. President.
Our distinguished sponsor, the champion of the mother tongue, promotion in education, no other than Senator Win Gatchalian, and our minority floor leader, Senator Coco Pimentel, is recognized.
Mr. President, we're redefining it. So we're only championing mother tongue for monolingual areas, monolingual classes and areas.
That's why I'm going to listen intently to your interpolation to understand the bill.
That is what, yes. That is what we need to understand, Mr. President. So with the permission of our sponsor, we will now commence our interpellation, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Ito pong mother tongue based education ay actually pinagmalaki ito noon, Mr. President. So, and we now have a bill, our bill I think overhauls what does our bill change, Mr. President? From this much publicized, much valued program, Mr. President.
Well, Mr. President, when the K-12 law was enacted in 2013, to be exact, under Republic Act number 10533, it specified in the law that the mother tongue will be used as the medium of instruction, Mr. President. So regardless if the class or the school is multilingual, meaning they speak different languages, the teacher is obligated and mandated to use mother tongue as the medium of instruction inside the classroom. So for Key Stage 1, for kindergarten all the way to grade 3. So after 4 hearings, 4 focus group discussions nationwide, Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, and NCR, and countless consultation, we found out that the application of the mother tongue as medium of instruction is very complicated in our setting. Moreover, there is no study, whether domestic, local study, or international study, that pointed that mother tongue can be used in multilingual setting. So the bill calls for redefining the application or redefining the use of mother tongue. Mother tongue can still be used, but solely in monolingual classes, Mr. President, not in multilingual classes.
In a multilingual class, which is most likely in a multilingual area, tama po ba yun? The
Correct.
multilingual class is most likely located in a multilingual area.
Correct, Mr. President. Mostly urban areas, cities. But Mr. President, we also went to municipalities and also off-site areas. Like for example, in Davao, we went to this barangay called Marahan. And in that little barangay, where they have also a elementary school there, they speak 9 languages already, Mr. President, other than Bisaya, or other than the language in Davao, which is Davaoenyo Bisaya, Mr. President. So in other words, even in rural areas, they have multilingual settings in schools, Mr. President.
The example given by our sponsor, Mr. President, was a school in a barangay in Davao City.
In Davao City, Mr.
So
President.
that's not a rural area,
Mr. President, this is 2 hours away from the center of Davao, from the city proper, Mr. President. So Davao is a big city. They have a rural and a city proper. So we went 2 hours away. This is actually bordering a province already, Mr. President. So that in that particular example that I mentioned, we found out that they speak 9 different languages already in that school, Mr. President. This is a breakdown of the different languages in that school.
Also, we're using Davao City as a good example. Even let us say, the farthest barangay from the city center, 2 hours away, is already multilingual. So is it safe to assume that Davao City is a multilingual area?
Oh, that's correct, Mr. President. The city proper is definitely multilingual, Mr. President. Even in Metro Manila, for example, in Valenzuela, we have a barangay that is, we have a big population of our Muslim brothers and sisters, and also Ilonggo. So we have a place there where they speak Tagalog, they speak Maranao, and they speak Ilonggo. So generally, Mr. President, in urban areas, it's multilingual in terms of class setting.
Ito po bang pagiging multilingual ng mga urban areas, is this a new phenomenon or matagal na po itong characteristic of urban areas?
In my observation, Mr. President, and throughout the hearing and consultations, it's because of migration and economic reasons, meaning, for example, if jobs are available in that area, our kababayans migrate from one province to the other, to that area in search of livelihood and employment. So that phenomenon has been going on. And that's actually quite obvious in the Philippines, where people migrate to another area in search of opportunities, especially employment.
Ito po bang provisions of law requiring the instruction to learners to be using the mother tongue? Kailan mo ba ito naisip, Mr. President?
Naging batas ho to in 2013, to be exact, under the Enhanced Basic Education Act in Republic Act number 10533. Yeah. But in 2012, Mr. President, the Department of Education attempted to implement mother tongue, Mr. President. This is in preparation for the K-12 implementation, because at that time, there was already a raging debate on K-12, and at the same time, the Department of Education in 2012 implemented mother tongue, Mr. President.
What were supposed to be the advantages, Mr. President?
Well, in theory, Mr. President, in theory, if the child is taught in his or her mother tongue, and mother tongue is defined as language or language first learned by a child. So if the child is taught in his first language, that improves the cognitive ability of the child, and that improves the child's ability to learn other subjects subsequently. So because the child is being taught in his or her mother tongue, the child will have an easier time to learn a particular subject or to learn a particular learning area, Mr. President.
Yeah, because yung language ng kanyang teacher ay naintindihan niya.
Correct, Mr. President. And that forms the building block. So kung naintindihan niya na yung in simple terms, naintindihan niya na yung subject na yan, then they can go on to much more complex subjects. So the mother tongue becomes the base or the foundation in which the child will learn more complex subjects, Mr. President. So that's in theory, that is the application or the benefit of mother tongue.
So 2012, the Department of Education tried to implement this through a department order, and then Congress subsequently enacted the law 2013, making this mandatory?
Yes, Mr. President, it became mandatory under the law. So DepEd has no choice but to implement mother tongue as medium of instruction, Mr. President.
Yeah, but the department order dated 2012 by DepEd also.
Yes, Mr. President.
Also uses the same idea.
Yes, Mr. President. Correct.
Yes. Yes, baka nga yung idea nga galing din sa DepEd, Mr. President. So, for example, let's use Davao City as the example, Mr. President. In 2012 and 2013, was the mother tongue mandate implemented in Davao City, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President. It was implemented there, Mr. President.
Eh, Mr. President, noong 2012, 2013, multilingual na yung Davao, I'm sure, Mr. President.
Yes, correct,
So what was the mother tongue identified as the mother tongue of Davao, Mr. President?
Well, Mr. President, at that time, the Department of Education identified how many? 6? That time, 2012? 12 mother tongues, Mr. President. Right now, they have 19 official mother tongues that is being used nationwide. And during that time, in 2012, they have 12 mother tongue, Mr. President. But let me put on record, Mr. President, our findings in the committee that we asked several entities, how many languages are there in the Philippines? If you use the PSA data, because the PSA conducts census and they will ask the individual what is their language, it's 200, they detected 245 different languages. If we use the Summer Institute of Linguistics, SIL, it's an organization specializing in languages who was present here for a long time already doing research. They have detected 148 different languages. And then we...
148 or...
Sorry, 184. Sorry, 184. And then we also asked the Commission sa Wikang Filipino during the hearing, and they told us there are 130 different languages that they have detected. So if you go by the PSA number, there are 245 mother tongues, meaning the first language of the child. But since 245 is very difficult in terms of implementation, the DepEd decided to use only 19 to date. And they have disclosed during the hearing that they have plans to increase the number of mother tongue. But of course, increasing the mother tongue means more different textbooks. They have to print different textbooks, learning materials for the child. They also have to print different dictionaries, different teacher guides, different orthography. So it follows that you have to print different materials using the mother tongue that they have, that they will prescribe, Mr. President. So logistically, it became a problem, and also, of course, budgetary constraints became an issue.
Well, Mr. President, I want to even discuss theoretically, Mr. President. So let's use Davao City as the example, Mr. President. So how many public schools are in Davao City which offer kinder to grade 3, where this is where the mother tongue directive is being implemented? Tama po ba? Kinder
Yes,
to grade 3.
Mr. President.
So how many schools in Davao City are covered by the mother tongue policy, Mr. President?
We don't have the specific number of schools, Mr. President. I can get that.
Hindi, okay. This is my point, Mr. President. Sa Davao City, what is the mother tongue from the point of view of DepEd, Mr. President?
It's called Sinugbuanon Binisaya, Mr. President. That is the official mandated mother tongue for Davao City. And from what we gathered, I remember this very clearly, and the good minority leader being a Bisaya speaker, I remember very clearly from our focus group that our teachers and the principals were complaining because they said that Sinugbuanong Binisaya and Davao Binisaya is different. And there are many instances that they have to translate to the learner from Sinugbuanong Binisaya to Davao Binisaya. No? So, in other words, that made their teaching or the learning in classroom much more complex because the mandated language that they have to use is different from the actual language that they are using.
Sinugbuanong Binisaya is one of the 19 mother tongues.
Correct, Mr. President.
How about Dabaoeño Binisaya?
It's not included, Mr. President.
Precisely. So, in the implementation of the program, why did they even entertain, did they entertain using Dabawenyong Bisaya?
Well, Mr. President, this is actually quite interesting because they reasoned out that with the 19 languages, they cover 80%, 85% to be exact, 85% of the population, Mr. President. But when we asked them, what is the basis of that 85%, no one can produce to the committee what is the basis. They said it's an estimate or a common knowledge. Even we asked the KWF on that number, but no one can give us research on how they derive that 85%, Mr. President. So that's the theory why they chose that 19.
Yes, lumalabas, Mr. President, when the DepEd implemented the mother tongue policy, the decision on what mother tongue is being used in a certain locality was centralized all the way up here in Metro Manila?
The decision was centralized, Mr. President. Yes.
Kasi
during those
kung ganun po yung testimony po natin or information coming from our sponsor, Sinugbuanong Binisaya on paper ang ginudge nila na language dyan, and then sasabihin ang feedback is hindi po, Dabawenyong Binisaya ang salita dito. Actually, Mr. President, matagal nang alam o kilala nasa Davao, pwede ka mabuhay doon ng tinagalog ka eh. Magtagalog ka doon, survive ka
Correct,
doon eh.
Mr. President.
Mr. President eh. Unlike sa Cagayan de Oro, pwede pa hindi dati I mean, before, hindi. Talagang marami pang hindi ka maintindihan or pagsagutin ka nila, hindi mo sila maintindihan. Sa Davao, maka-adjust sila sa'yo.
That's
So, my question is, how come merong dinesignate na mother tongue sa Davao City when we all know it's a metropolis already, Mr. President. Andun na, nakita-kita na po lahat doon, iba-iba salita, Mr. President.
Well, Mr. President, from our hearing, we gathered that because of that 19 mandated languages, they decided that the Sinugbuanong Binisaya is the closest to Davao Binisaya. They call it in technical term mutually intelligible. But and that was the deciding factor why they chose Sinigbuanong Binisaya. The same for the Cordillera area, the same with Bicol area, the same rationale that they use in justifying on why only 19 and why impose a certain language in that area because it's mutually intelligible.
Sige pa, siguro may mga root words na maraming common root words, so pwedeng maintindihan po. So, kumusta po? So, since 2012, let us say, nag-mother tongue policy na tayo sa Davao City, si Sinugbuanong Binisaya ang designated na mother tongue, tapos 2024 na ngayon, so ilan na, 11 years, ano na, yung grade 3, ano na ngayon yung grade 3, Mr. President, after 11 years, ano na siya?
Graduate na yun, Mr. President.
Graduate na sa K-12. Sige
Mr.
po,
President.
siguro nasukat naman yun sa isang mga assessment exam. Kumusta po ang performance ng mga estudyante natin sa Davao City na dumaan sa mother tongue policy?
Well, Mr. President, we precisely asked for an impact study from the DepEd because typically in implementing a certain concept, you conduct an impact study every now and then, periodically. Unfortunately, they have not conducted any impact study. The only study that we have gathered was from PIDS. They conducted a study year 2019. And in that study, basically, Mr. President, in the study, they said that the basic finding of that study by the PIDS that it's very complex to implement the mother tongue in a multilingual setting for practical reasons, because you have to have large budgetary requirement, Of course, there's also training involved, and basically it's very complex. No? That's the only study that we have seen after implementing the mother tongue in 2013.
So, hindi,
Mr.
yes, Mr. President, si Senator Ligarda.
Yes,
Yes,
with the permission.
our distinguished colleague, Senator Lauren Legarda, is recognized, although she's not wearing the proper attire, but she's excused because she's sick.
I've been, only with the permission, I know that the minority leader has the floor. With the permission of the minority leader, I'm wearing
Yes,
a proper
please proceed.
attire.
Please
It is a
proceed.
blouse. Yes,
it's a blouse,
it is a
okay.
blouse.
Yeah,
It is
okay.
not, it's a blouse, yes.
You're forgiven, ma'am, you're sick, it's okay.
Yes.
Please proceed, please proceed.
Mr. President, thank you for acknowledging me, and only if Senator Pimentel allows
Yes,
me
ma'am.
to
Yes, ma'am.
intervene.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
I allow you.
Yes, because this will also help in your interpellation. Thank you, Senator Gatchalian. May I just
you.
know,
Thank you, ma'am.
because I was already in the Senate during the K-12, and I want to know whether the 19 languages that were selected by the Department of Education then, that would be utilized for the mother tongue in the implementation of K-12, were they selected by DepEd, and have all the paraphernalia requirements been translated in these 19 languages in the areas where they are being implemented, or 11 years as of now, this is still in the process of being translated? May I know if in monolingual areas, or is it in multilingual areas, the 19 languages, we already have books? Do we have teaching materials? Are visual materials, are they complete? Or has it not been implemented whatsoever? Thank you, Minority Leader.
Thank you for that question. That's a very important question, Mr. President, with the permission of the Minority Leader. In that PIDS study in 2019, they precisely measured that, the readiness of DepEd in implementing the mother tongue, and how did they implement it after 7 years or 8 years in the implementation of mother tongue. And the DepEd also came up what they call the 4 minima requirements. I will flash it on the 17th. The 4 minima requirements basically said, before you implement mother tongue in your schools, you have to have these 4 minima requirements. And these 4 minima requirements is: number 1, working orthography; number 2, vocabulary in terms, in the form of a glossary or dictionary; number 3, grammar book and spelling guide for teachers; and number 4, literature or reading materials. And the findings are, in slide 18, only 9% of our schools, or 9% of the schools that they conducted the study in, fulfilled the 4 minima requirements. So only 9%. In fact, if you look at the slide, 49% of the schools only fulfilled 1, and 6% did not fulfill anything. So in other words, in short, they're already implementing the mother tongue without fulfilling the 4 minima requirements as prescribed by DepEd themselves. So the schools are not to be blamed because they're mandated to implement it. And the materials, as we all know, are centralized, coming from the central office. But the materials are not coming down, meaning there's no orthography, there's no dictionary translated in those 19 mother tongues, but they're forced to implement it and to make it worse in a multilingual setting.
Okay. Thank you for that comprehensive and very accurate answer, Senator Gatchalian. Again, with the permission of the Minority Leader, if you would allow me, please, although I will interpolate next week. So we see that the implementation of the mother tongue is very minimal despite 11 years of the K-12, and therefore your intervention now to tweak the law so that this will not be used is timely, because we are not ready even 11 years after the enactment of the law, and how much more if it would be in the next decade. So we can see that it has hardly been complied with considering the four requirements. Is that correct, Mr. Sponsor?
Correct, to our Senate pro tempore. We are not totally abandoning the mother tongue. We're just tweaking the implementation because in the 39 different studies that we went through, both local studies and international studies, everything pointed to that mother tongue can only be implemented in monolingual settings. And one of the reasons for that is also practicality because you have to only print what type of language. But in a setting wherein you have 9 different languages in one school, as what we have seen in Davao, you have to print 9 different types of books, 9 different learning materials, 9 different teacher guides, and that becomes quite impractical in terms of implementing that on the ground. And as what I've demonstrated and showed earlier, if you go by the PSA survey, there's about 245 different languages detected by the PSA. That's good because we have detected the different languages, but in terms of using it as medium of instruction, it's quite complex because if you implement mother tongue to its purest form, then you have to print 245 different textbooks, 245 different learning guides, and so on, Mr. President.
Thank you. Just one last, with the permission of the minority leader, then I will ask my questions next week. Who determined which of the various local languages would be considered the mother tongue for a distinct province? For example, you were speaking to the minority leader about Davao, and of the different languages present in that region, you mentioned a Bisaya kind of mother language that was considered the mother tongue. Was it the Department of Education then who selected among the multifarious languages in a certain jurisdiction which would be considered the mother tongue?
It's decided by the DepEd management, specifically the central office. I'm sure they also consulted the locals, the local regional directors and also the local superintendents. But I believe that it's the national that dictated the 19 different languages because they also have to look at printing the textbooks and printing the teacher guides and the other materials. So that was the decision-making process to arrive at the 19 different languages. And just to demonstrate, we got this from a slide from USAID because they were also conducting research on mother tongue. This is in Bicol. And in Bicol, apparently, there are 13 different Bicol languages. In fact, the anecdote that I hear there, you walk to a different municipality, it's a different version of Bicol, of Bicolano. And, but DepEd mandated only Naga Bicol as the mother tongue for the entire Region 5. And as we know, Masbate has a different type of language. In Naga, they have a different type of language. In other parts of Bicol, they have different types of language. But it's mandated there that they will only use one as opposed to the 13 different Bicol languages.
Thank you very much for that, Senator Gatchalian, and apologies and my thanks to the minority leader for this intervention. I just found it very, very interesting and I will interpolate next week. Thank you, Mr. President.
One more point, Mr. President, before I will ask for a suspension, Mr. President, because of the new matter opened up by our Senate President pro tempore. But one question: the law made the use of the mother tongue mandatory in the instruction of our young learners. But in that DepEd order, what was it? Was it also mandatory or experimental or optional?
It's mandatory, Mr. President.
Also,
it's also
under the
mandatory,
DepEd.
Mr. President. So in fact, we invited regional directors to the hearing, and they manifested that they have to use, for example, in Cordillera, they have 20 20 plus different languages there. But they are mandated to use Ilocano because in that 19 different languages,
Yun ang in-identify.
yun in-identify as the
Okay ba?
lingua
Okay ba?
franca
Okay.
of that area.
So, meaning to say, kung wala yung provision in the law and yet andun yung department order, what could have happened, Mr. President?
Well, the result will be DepEd will probably use the most common language or go back to our original go back to the original intention in the Constitution to use Filipino because that's the most widely used, that's the most understood language nationwide. Mr.
Meaning to
President.
say, the secretary could easily just parang repeal the department order or withdraw
Correct,
the
Mr.
department
President.
order. Kasi-
In fact, in our consultation with DepEd, they cited the law as the basis for them to mandate the implementation of mother tongue, and they also want to amend the law so that it will give them the flexibility and also give them that elbow room, or it will allow them to use go back to Filipino as the medium of instruction.
Sige po. Sige. Okay, Mr. President, so I think if with the permission of our sponsor, if I could suspend my interpellation, and then pagbalik po natin, we can probably start with the constitutional provision governing the medium of instruction in schools, Mr. President. So, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you to the minority leader and to our Senate Pro Tempore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very
With that,
much.
I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2457. So move, Mr. President.
There be no objection to the motion. Motion's
Hindi pa natin
We also like to wish Senator Lauren the best, that she gets well soon.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, may I move that we proceed with the Senate President's designation of an additional conferee of the Bicameral Conference Committee on the Disagreeing Provisions of Senate Bill number 2449 and House Bill number 8327, both pertaining to the organizational reforms in the Philippine National Police.
There be no objection to the motion. We hereby designate an additional conferee by the name of our distinguished colleague, Senator Bongo. So designated. Shall we, yes. Majority Leader?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Monday, March 4, 2024.
There being no objection to the motion of the Majority Floor Leader, session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, March 4, 2024. Have a safe weekend, everyone.